What is up, duelists? Super Insane 18 here, and as promised in the deck profile, today we are bringing you the fully dedicated combo tutorial for Snake Eye Azamina Fiendsmith. We are going to be bringing you 6 combos that will showcase not only how you can play the cards that you have, but also how to play into some interruptions as well. So let's go ahead and get started. For combo number 1, we are going to go somewhat quickly because this is just a refresher of the combo that we ended the deck profile with, but maybe you need that refresher, maybe you didn't see the deck profile. We are going to show you what I refer to as the Wombo combo and how a single copy of Snake Eye Ash is able to get us into every single engine in our deck. So let's show you guys how it is done. We will start off with a normal summon of the Snake Eye Ash, activating its effect to then search for a Snake Eyes. Of course, that is going to grab us our copy of Poplar. Poplar has the effect that when it is searched, it can summon itself out, so we will go ahead and summon it with its own effect, activating its on summon effect as well, allowing us to search for a copy of Dramatic Chase. We can go ahead and immediately activate the Dramatic Chase, which will allow us to place the Diabellstar the Black Witch into our spell and trap zone, which is important for later, but also gives us another material now to use for the Snake Eye Ash effect. We're going to go ahead and use the Ash, sending itself and the Diabellstar, summoning out a copy of Snake Eye Oak from our deck, which Oak on summon will then allow us to reborn out that copy of Ash. Now we've got a bunch of monsters on field, so we can go ahead and link off the Poplar and the Snake Eye Ash. This is going to, of course, start bridging into our Fiendsmith engine with Moon of the Closed Heaven, but we need to not forget to use the Poplar effect to go ahead and place itself in the spell and trap zone, which will become relevant as the combo goes on. We're going to go ahead and link off the copy of Moon of the Closed Heaven into our copy of Requiem, and then of course the Requiem effect to tribute itself as cost to summon out our copy of Lacrima. Once Lacrima is summoned, we can use its effect to go ahead and get rid of our Fiendsmith Engraver, dumping it to the graveyard, and that's going to come up a little bit later. The next step that we are going to do is using the graveyard effect of the Requiem, we will equip it to our copy of Lacrima, which gives us more fodder for the effect of Snake Eye Oak. Using Oak, we will send itself and the Requiem. This is of course going to summon out our Flamberge, and then we can take the Flamberge and the Lacrima, and we are going to link these off into our copy of Hida. The Flamberge will of course activate its effect when it is linked away. We will summon back out the Ash and the Oak from our graveyard, and next what we can do is use the graveyard effect of our Engraver, which will shuffle back specifically the Moon of the Closed Heaven. Reason is we want to leave the Requiem and the Lacrima in the graveyard for later combos, or rather interruptions during our opponent's turn. And now we can take the Engraver and the Oak, and we can link those off into our copy of Fiendsmith's Sequence. With Sequence now on the board, we can use its effect, shuffling back all 3 of our Fiendsmith monsters. This is of course going to give us the necessary material for the fusion summon of Desiree. Here we can then take the Sequence and the Ash, we will link both of these into our copy of Promethean Princess, and then we have the Sequence in the graveyard, which we can then equip to the Desiree, which we will use for its negate later on. Using the Promethean Princess, we can go ahead and resummon back out our Flamberge Dragon, which will now be a part of our end board. We can then use the Desiree negating the Princess. This is important to get rid of our Firelock. That is going to go into our copy of Selene. We will be able to gain 3 counters because we have 1, 2, and 3 spells, meaning that we have exactly what we need to then remove those counters for the effect of Selene, which will allow us to then reborn out our copy of Diabellstar. Of course, Diabellstar on summon will be able to activate its effect. This is going to set the Deception of Sinful Spoils from our deck to our side of the field. We can go ahead and just immediately activate that using its effect, sending the Diabellstar. This will allow us to add the Hollowed Azamina from our deck to our hand. We can then use the Hollowed Azamina, sending the Deception and revealing the Roseliago, and then going and summoning out the Roseliago, which of course on summon will activate its effect, allowing us to then add our copy of Wanted from our deck to our hand. We have not yet used the effect of the Flamberge Dragon to place a monster in the spell trap zone, so we will go ahead and place any monster, does not really matter, into the spell trap zone, and the reason that's important is because now with 2 monsters that are treated as spells, we can go ahead and summon out our copy of Doomed Dragon. Now the reason we're doing this step is because we are able to use the graveyard effect of the Hollowed Azamina, but it has to return an Azamina monster, so we want to get as much value out of the Azamina as we can by linking it off first. So linking off the Roseliago Resiliago and the Doomed Dragon, we can go ahead and go into our IP Masquerena, which will again be part of our end board. Now we have the Resiliago and the Hollowed in the graveyard. We can go ahead and add the Hollowed back by putting the Resiliago back into our extra deck, and now we can go ahead and perform another fusion summon, but we're going to be doing something a little bit cool. We're going to go ahead and activate the Hollowed Azamina, which does have to send on resolution, but we want to chain the Wanted. The reason that we're doing this is to get the full value out of our Wanted. Wanted is, of course, going to add us another copy of Diabellstar from our deck to our hand, and then the Hollowed will be able to send the Wanted we just activated to summon out our copy of Sylvia, giving us an additional Omni-Negate on our end board. Next, what we are going to do is we are going to use the graveyard effect of the Wanted, banishing it from our graveyard, and placing the Deception to the bottom of the deck. This is going to allow us to draw a card. This draw can be anything, so don't pay attention to the draw, because the reason this is a self-contained combo is with that draw, we can go ahead and then summon out our copy of Diabellstar by discarding a card. It could be the draw, it could be anything you had in your hand if you drew a really good card. Realistically, doesn't matter. The important part is that we now have an additional monster on our end board, because we're going to take the Selene and the Black Witch, and we're going to link both of these into a copy of Silhouette Rabbit, and Silhouette Rabbit on summon is going to set the Angel Statue Azure rune to our side of the field, and this is going to be the end board. This is upwards of 7 with a potentially 8th interruption depending on how you sequence your cards, because you're going to have the IP into SP, you have the Omni-Negate on Sylvia, the Omni-Negate on Desiree, you have the Rabbit, which will pop a card, you have the Rune, which will negate a summon, and of course you still have the Princess in the graveyard for a pop and additional follow-up, and you're going to get the follow-up off of the Snake Eyes Flamberge as well. You still have 4 cards in your hand, and you would be hard-pressed to find a deck that can play out of this. Combo number 2 is going to be a 1.5 card combo utilizing Snake Eye Ash and any card that you are willing to discard. Now, while it is a little bit more expensive, it is a much safer combo because it does play around something like Nibiru, which we will explain as we are playing out the combo. Let's show you guys how it goes. It still ends on the same 7 to 8 interruptions, albeit slightly different interruptions than the first combo. We are going to normal summon out the copy of Snake Eye Ash, utilizing its effect to add us our copy of Poplar, which will then of course summon itself, and on summon use its effect to search, this time grabbing us our copy of Divine Temple rather than Dramatic Chase. We will then activate the Divine Temple, which will allow us to place the Snake Eyes Diabellstar from our deck to our spell trap zone, which we can then use as the material for Ash's effect, sending itself and the Snake Eyes Diabellstar to summon the Oak from our deck. Oak is of course then going to summon back out the Ash, and now we can bridge into our Fiendsmith engine. Using the Poplar and the Ash, we will link into our copy of Moon of the Closed Heaven, and utilizing the Poplar effect, we will go ahead and place the Snake Eyes Diabellstar back into the spell and trap zone. Now this is the reason that this plays better into something like Nibiru, because we will always have the Divine Temple live with a monster in our spell trap zone, meaning that if our opponent Nibirus us, the Divine Temple can summon out whatever monster we have, and then link off with the Nib token, giving us a bit more playability rather than just passing on the token. Now we can take the Moon of the Closed Heaven, of course, and link that off into our Requiem, and then as always utilizing the Requiem to tribute itself and summon out the Lacrima. We will utilize the Lacrima to then summon out send our copy of Fiendsmith Engraver, and then we can use the graveyard effect of the Requiem to attach to the Lacrima, and utilize it for the Oak material with Oak's effect, sending both to the graveyard to summon out our copy of Flamberge. Now this is another place where it doesn't pay for our opponent to Nibiru us, because we will then have 4 monsters on the field, the summon off the Flamberge, plus the summon from the spell trap zone, so it does really play well into it. Next, what we can do is we can go ahead and summon out our Engraver by once again shuffling our copy of Moon of the Closed Heaven, and then we can take the Lacrima and the Engraver and link both of those off into our copy of Sequence. We will take the Sequence and utilize its effect to then shuffle back the 3 Fiendsmiths that we have. This is of course going to give us the material necessary for the fusion summon of the Fiendsmith's Desiree, and now we are going to utilize the effect of the Snake Eye Diabellstar, which will place the Oak back into the spell trap zone and summon itself out. Utilizing the Flamberge and the Snake Eyes Diabellstar, we can go ahead and link these off into our copy of IP Masquerena, and now that we no longer have the Flamberge will be able to activate its effect and summon back out the Ash and the Poplar. Now this is a potentially good spot for your opponent to Nibiru you, but again, remember we have the Temple and the Oak, meaning that we will have Oak plus Nib token and allow us to continue link summoning from there. What we're going to do now actually is we are going to take the Sequence and the IP, and we are going to link those off into our copy of Abawaku, the Lightless Shadow. Now the cool thing about Abawaku is this is why we needed the discard. We can go ahead and use its effect, discarding the card and banishing itself. This is going to then reborn out our copy of IP Masquerena. We can then take the IP Masquerena and the Poplar, and we will link those off into our copy of Promethean Princess, and Promethean Princess is going to allow us to once again summon back out our copy of Flamberge. Here we will use the graveyard effect of the Sequence to equip itself to the Desiree, and then Desiree will be able to negate the Princess, allowing us to use the Princess and the Ash to link summon into the copy of Silhouette Rabbit. Silhouette Rabbit on summon will set the copy of Azuroon, and we can go ahead and then finally use the effect of the Flamberge Dragon, placing the IP Masquerena from our graveyard back into the spell trap zone and ending our turn. In the end phase, the Abawaku will return itself from the banish. Now we have 3 cards left in our hand and all of this set up. Of course, we still have the Rabbit and Azuroon interruptions. We still have the interruptions off the Desiree. We now have an additional pop off of the Abawaku. Either the Temple or the Flamberge will be able to summon the IP. IP, of course, then going into SP, utilizing either the Desiree or the Flamberge. You ideally want to use the Desiree because then it uses, or rather gives you another send as well. All of that on top of having the Promethean Princess still in the graveyard with the guaranteed follow-up that you will be getting off of the Flamberge as well. For combo number 3, we will be showing you how Poplar is once again a 1-card starter. Now, admittedly, it is not as strong as something like Ash, but it still can get you 4 interruptions on its own, plus 4 additional cards in your hand as well, so let's show you guys how it is done. We will start with the normal summon of the Poplar and activating its effect on summon to add us our copy of Divine Temple. We will then go ahead and activate the Divine Temple. Utilizing its effect, this time we will actually place the Ash into the spell and trap zone because we will be utilizing it later on in the combo. We will take the Poplar, linking it off into our copy of Relinquished Anima, and then activating the Poplar effect to place itself back in the Spell and Trap zone. With 2 monsters in our Spell and Trap zone, we can go ahead and use those as the materials required for the summon of Snake Eyes Doom Dragon, and now with 2 monsters on the field, you guessed it, we can go ahead and bridge into our Fiendsmith engine. So we're going to link both of those off into the copy of Moon, and then we can go ahead and link the Moon off into our copy of Requiem. Requiem will be able to activate, tributing itself as cost to summon out our copy of Lacrima, which will then of course send our copy of Engraver. Utilizing the Engraver, we will summon it back to our side of the field by shuffling back the Moon of the Closed Heaven, and then we can link off both the Lacrima and the Engraver into our copy of Sequence. We will use the Sequence effect, shuffling back the Lacrima, the Engraver, and the Requiem, and that is of course, as always, going to give us the material necessary for the summon of Fiendsmith's Desiree. Now, you could, technically speaking, end your combo here by just equipping the Sequence to the Desiree and having Desiree as an interruption, but we can actually get so much more if we just link these off. So that is exactly what we're going to do. Utilizing the Sequence and the Desiree, we are going to link off into our copy of Promethean Princess, which will then be able to use its effect, summoning back out our copy of Snake Eye Ash, meaning that we have bridged back into our Snake Eye combos. Ash on summon is of course going to add us our Poplar, and then Poplar, despite using its on summon effect, has not used the effect to summon itself. So we will go ahead and summon itself. Here we can take the Ash and use its effect, sending the Princess. This is going to summon out our copy of Snake Eye Oak, which will then utilize the Oak effect to allow us to reborn back out our Ash. Here we will use the Snake Eye Oak. We will go ahead and send it off with the copy of Temple. This is of course going to summon out our copy of Flamberge, and then finally we can take the Ash and the Poplar and go into our copy of IP Masquerena. Before we end our turn, we want to utilize the Flamberge, placing the Fiendsmith's Desiree into our Spell and Trap zone, and that will be the end of our turn. And this is actually 4 interruptions. The reason it is 4 is because the Flamberge on our opponent's turn will be able to summon out our Desiree, which will then become the material that we use for the IP Masquerena to summon out our SP Little Knight. That gives SP Little Knight a banish on summon. It will give the Desiree a send because it was sent to the graveyard, so that is 2. The 3rd interruption comes from the on-field effect of the SP Little Knight, and the fourth is of course going to be the Promethean Princess, popping the Flamberge and something our opponent controls, of course then giving us all of the recursion of Flamberge as well, and we still have the additional 4 cards in our hand that we started with alongside the Poplar. And before we continue with the final 3 combos, again, just a reminder that the popular monster Metal Field Center that you are seeing on the screen is still available for purchase on our website, insanetcg.com. It is a limited run of only 100, so you want to make sure that you guys have yours before they run out. Go ahead and click the link in the description down below to get yours now. For combo number 4, now that we know what a single copy of Ash or Poplar can get us, you might be asking what to do in case of hand traps. Now, Dueling Guard is a very commonly played hand trap this format, and thankfully Snake Eyes has no problem playing through it, so let's show you guys how it's done. We will start with the normal summon of the Snake Eye Ash, which will of course allow us to add our copy of Poplar, allowing Poplar to become Chainlink 1 to summon, and our opponent drops Droll as Chainlink 2, locking us out from searching for the remainder of the game. The Poplar will of course summon itself, and without the search, we can still continue to play. We will link the Poplar off into our copy of Relinquished Anima, and then use the Poplar's effect to place itself back into the Spell Entrap zone. We will then use the Ash effect, sending itself and the Poplar to summon out our copy of Oak, which will of course allow Oak to reborn out our copy of Ash. With the Anima and the Ash, we can bridge into our Fiendsmith engine, of course going into the Moon of the Closed Heaven, and then turning the Moon into our copy of Requiem. Requiem will do Requiem things, tributing itself to summon out our copy of Lacrima, and Lacrima of course will then send our copy of Engraver. Utilizing the graveyard effect of the Requiem, we can attach it to the Lacrima, and then utilize the copy of Oak to send itself and the Lacrima to summon out our copy of Flamberge. Now here we are actually going to do things in a bit of a weird order, but it is to play safer around something like Nibiru. We will take the Flamberge and the Lacrima, and we will link them off into our copy of IP Masquerena, and then the Flamberge effect will allow us to reborn out 2 of our level 1 fires. It really does not matter which ones, because they've all been used at this point. But the reason we're doing it in this order is because it is very tempting for your opponent to Nibiru you after you have already successfully used your Flamberge, which if they do, we still have the Engraver in the graveyard to continue on with our plays. If they don't Nibiru us here, we're probably safe, so now what we're going to do is finally use the graveyard effect of the Requiem, summoning itself from graveyard by shuffling back the Moon of the Closed Heaven. Utilizing the Engraver and either of the 2 fires that we resummoned, we are of course going to go into our copy of Sequence, which will then be able to use the Sequence to shuffle back the Engraver, the Lacrima, and the Requiem, and of course go into our copy of Fiendsmith's Desiree. Here we will use the Sequence and whatever fire we have left, in this case Ash. This is going to go into our copy of Promethean Princess. We can use the graveyard effect of the Sequence to attach to the Desiree, just so that we don't forget later, but now the Promethean Princess is going to go ahead and be able to reborn out our copy of Flamberge. Now we will use the negate from the Desiree to turn off the Princess fire locking us, and we will link the IP and the Princess into our copy of Silhouette Rabbit. Silhouette Rabbit, of course, on summon is going to set our copy of Azuroon, and finally we can use the Flamberge to place the IP back into our spell trap zone, leaving us with this endboard. And this is pretty much all of the same interactions that we had from the first combos through something like Dueling Guard. We are missing either the Bow or the Omni Negate of the Silva, but this is still upwards of 7 interruptions with guaranteed follow-up and 4 cards still left in your hand. Combo number 5 is how we are going to play off of a single Poplar into our opponent's Dueling Guard. Now, admittedly, this is not as strong as the Ash combo. You are only going to end on 3 interruptions as opposed to the 7 that we ended in the previous one, but it is still an important combo for you guys to know, so let's show you guys how it works. We will start with the normal summon of the Poplar, which of course is going to allow us to add our copy of Divine Temple, and this is when our opponent is able to droll us, meaning we no longer get any adds. Here we will activate the Divine Temple. That is of course going to allow us to place a monster. In this instance it is going to be the Ash. We will take the Poplar and link it off into our copy of Anima, utilizing the Poplar to place itself into our Spell Entrap zone. That of course gives us 2 of our Spell Trap monsters, meaning that we can fuse into our copy of Doom Dragon, and with 2 monsters now on the field, we can go ahead and bridge into our Fiendsmith engine by going into Moon. Moon then goes into Requiem, Requiem of course then goes into Lacrima, and Lacrima of course then sends our Engraver. Here we cannot beat around the bush and do anything really cool, so we do have to just summon out our engraver by shuffling back our copy of the moon, and that is going to allow us to turn the lacrima and the engraver into our copy of sequence. Sequence will then of course allow us to shuffle back our 3 Fiendsmith monsters, once again giving us the material that we need to summon out the copy of Desiree. And just like previous combos, if you want, you can just equip the sequence and end on the Desiree, but we still want to obtain a little bit more interruptions. So we're going to take the Desiree and the sequence, and we will link those off into our copy of Promethean Princess. Promethean Princess is of course then going to allow us to summon out our copy of Ash. Here the Ash can utilize its effect. We can't search on summon, but we can still use the effect to summon on or from deck to send itself and the temple to summon out our copy of Oak. Oak is then of course going to allow us to summon out our copy of Ash back from our graveyard. Here we are going to utilize the Oak sending itself and the Princess. This is going to allow us to summon out our copy of Flamberge, and then the Flamberge and the Ash are going to link into our copy of IP Masquerena. Flamberge, of course, is going to activate its effect. We can summon back any 2, does not really matter. I would probably use a Poplar just so that we can place something back into the spell trap zone, but that's really not as important anymore, and this is going to be 3 interruptions. Of course, we have the IP linking anything off into the SP, that is 2 interruptions in and of itself, but we of course also have the Promethean Princess, which provides us our 3rd interruption, as well as guaranteed follow-up, assuming that it sticks to the board, because then we can just reborn the Ash and full combo on the following turn. And to round off the video with our 6th and final combo, we will be showing you guys what a lot of players are utilizing as one of the best combos in the deck, using Poplar and Unicorn. We will go ahead and special out our Unicorn because we control no monsters, but we will not yet use its effect because we don't want to play into something like Droll. We will instead normal summon out our Poplar, which will allow us to search for our copy of Divine Temple, and then assuming we don't get Drolled, we can use the Unicorn to add us our copy of Birth. We will activate the Divine Temple, of course allowing us to place into the spell trap zone our copy of Snake Eye Ash, because we have not yet utilized the Ash, meaning we will get to it later on in the combo. Here we will take the Unicorn and the Poplar. This is going to go into our copy of Moon of the Closed Heaven, and then Poplar will place itself back into the spell trap zone. Here we can go ahead and just bridge into our Fiendsmith engine by taking Moon, turning it into Requiem, Requiem summoning out the Lacrima, and then Lacrima sending out our copy of Engraver. What we will do here is we will equip the copy of Requiem, and then using that plus the Ash, we can actually go ahead and fusion summon into our copy of Doomed Dragon. Next, we will summon out our copy of Engraver by shuffling back the Moon of the Closed Heaven, and utilizing the Engraver plus the Lacrima, we can go ahead and go into our copy of Sequence. Using the Sequence, we will shuffle back the Lacrima, the Engraver, and the Requiem, once again using the correct materials to summon out our copy of Fiendsmith's Desiree. And now we can take the Sequence and the Doomed Dragon, and we will link those off into our copy of Princess. We will take the Sequence in the graveyard and equip it to our Desiree just so that we don't forget later, and then we can utilize the Princess effect to reborn out our copy of Snake Eye Ash. Now, Snake Eye Ash has not yet used its effect, so we can use its effect to add our 2nd copy of Poplar, which will then of course allow us to summon out the Poplar because we have not yet used the summon effect. We do not get an additional add, but hey, we were just able to get an additional monster on the field. Here we will utilize the Ash effect to send itself and the Princess. This is going to allow us to summon out our copy of Oak, and then Oak will reborn out our copy of Ash. Utilizing the Ash and the Poplar, we can link those off into our copy of IP Masquerena, and then we can utilize the Oak, sending itself and the Poplar that is still in our spell trap zone, to summon a Flamberge out from our deck. Now we can go ahead and activate the Kashtira Birth, which will allow us to then resummon out our copy of Kashtira Unicorn, and this is where we get our first choice in a split line of play. If we are against something like Ryziel, you can end your board here and probably win the game, because as soon as they activate a monster effect, Unicorn is going to be able to rip the single copy of Detonator out of their extra deck, and that pretty much seals the game. However, if you know you're not against Ryziel, maybe this is game 2, you can go ahead and actually continue your plays from here. you can link off the Unicorn and the Masquerena into our copy of Silhouette Rabbit. Silhouette Rabbit, of course, then sets you your copy of Azurune, and you can utilize the effect of the Flamberge to place the IP Masquerena into the Spell and Trap Zone to later be summoned off of either Temple or Flamberge, and again, this ends you with a ton of interaction. The first line of play, you have your Unicorn on top of the IP Flamberge, Desiree, and Princess. The second iteration here gives you the Rabbit with the Azurune, the IP, the Flamberge, the Desiree, the Princess. You still have 3 cards in your hand, and this is just an absolutely absurd board to have to play into. And there you guys have it. That is going to be the fully dedicated combo tutorial for Snake Eye Azamina Fiendsmith. I hope you guys enjoyed and learned something. These are some of my favorite videos to bring to you guys because I love the responses of you guys coming into the comments and telling me that these helped you top a locals or even get your first regional or YCS top. Nothing warms my heart more than that because that is the whole reason that I have made this channel. So you guys know the deal. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like, comment, and share with your friends. As always, don't forget to check out the channel sponsor Dueling Guard using my code Insane18 or the link in the description down below. Not only can you get a discount, but you can help to support the channel. That way I can continue to bring you guys some amazing content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.